They call it the clean version of hell. A place where men are buried alive, not under dirt, but under silence. No sound, no touch, no sunlight. Just concrete and time. This is ADX Florence, America's most secure prison. But inside these walls, something darker is happening. The question is, can this place truly break the human spirit? The birth of a prison built to break. In the late 1980s, the United States was facing a crisis. Not outside its prisons, but inside them. Federal penitentiaries across the country were exploding with violence. Inmates murdered guards. Gang wars erupted in cell blocks. One of the bloodiest uprisings, the Marion lockdown in Illinois, turned into a national emergency. 2 guards were killed in a single day. Their deaths forced the federal government to lock down the entire facility, indefinitely. 4 years afterward, every prisoner at Marion lived in 23-hour isolation, a system the Bureau of Prisons called control unit confinement. But even that wasn't enough. Officials wanted a prison so secure that escape was impossible, violence was contained before it began, and control was absolute. So, in 1994, after a decade of design and debate, they built ADX Florence in the remote high desert of Colorado, just outside a quiet town called Florence. It was meant to be the end of the line, a place where the most violent, manipulative, and dangerous prisoners in America would be kept under constant watch. The press dubbed it the Alcatraz of the Rockies. But inside government documents, its description was colder, a control environment for managing disruptive inmates. Every inch of the prison was designed with psychological precision. Cells built entirely from reinforced concrete, with furniture molded into the floor. Windows so narrow, inmates can't tell where the sun is. Doors lined with steel to block voices and echo. Even the air vents are angled to prevent communication. A typical inmate here spends 23 hours a day locked in a 7 by 12-foot cell, eating, sleeping, and existing alone. The remaining hour, if they're lucky, is spent in a small concrete pit known as the recreation cage. No direct sunlight. No grass. No horizon. Just sky framed by barbed wire. From the start, ADX wasn't built to rehabilitate, it was built to control. The idea was simple: remove every external stimulus, limit every movement, silence every sound. To the Bureau of Prisons, it was order through deprivation. But to human rights groups, psychologists, and even former guards, it was something else. A living laboratory in psychological destruction. Solitary confinement for years, sometimes decades, doesn't just punish, it dismantles a person's mind. The human brain isn't built for that kind of isolation. Over the years, ADX would become home to America's most infamous inmates. The Unabomber, the Shoe Bomber, the Boston Marathon Bomber, El Chapo. Each man, sealed inside his concrete world, tested against the same silent weapon, time. But as we'll soon see, even the strongest minds can fracture when the walls never answer back. It's 5 a.m. inside ADX Florence, and the silence is already deafening. No shouting. No movement. Just the low mechanical hum of fluorescent lights that never go dark. In this place, silence is not peace, it's punishment. Each cell measures about 7 feet by 12 feet, smaller than an average parking space. The bed is poured concrete. The desk, concrete. The stool, concrete. A stainless steel toilet sink combo sits in one corner, controlled remotely by guards, to prevent flooding. Every cell has a solid steel door, not bars, with a small vertical slot just big enough to pass a food tray or cuff an inmate's hands. When the door shuts, the sound echoes like thunder, a noise you feel in your bones. For most inmates here, this is life. 23 hours a day, every day, year after year. At 7 a.m., breakfast arrives through the slot. It's silent. No eye contact, no words. A plastic tray slides in, the door slot clicks shut, and footsteps fade. The menu rarely changes. Powdered eggs, oatmeal, a slice of bread. Some inmates eat slowly to make it last. Others don't bother at all. After breakfast, the isolation deepens. There's no television for the first years of confinement. No internet. Just 4 blank walls, a Bible or a Quran if requested, and the sounds inside your own head. By mid-morning, the guards conduct a range walk, a routine check to ensure every inmate is alive. Communication between prisoners is forbidden, but humans always find a way. Some whisper through vents. Others tap on the walls, using a secret code learned over time, desperate for connection. A former ADX inmate described it this way: "It's like living in a tomb that still breathes. You talk to yourself just to remember what your voice sounds like." At noon, lunch is delivered, again through the slot. Once a week, inmates are allowed to exchange reading material. Newspapers are cut apart to remove images or ads that might be used for coded messages. Every movement, even a simple shower, is a coordinated operation. To leave their cell, an inmate is ordered to cuff up through the slot, wrists behind their back. 2 guards escort them to a small shower cell or the recreation cage, a concrete pen barely larger than the cell itself. The recreation cage is the only place inmates can see the sky, a thin rectangle through the mesh above. Some stare at it. Others ignore it, too broken to care. They get 1 hour, then they're led back inside, handcuffed the entire time. At 3 p.m., the cells go quiet again. This is when the weight of the silence starts to crush the mind. There's no noise, no distraction. Every sound echoes: your heartbeat, your breathing, your thoughts. For many, this becomes the real punishment. Time stops being measured by clocks. It's measured by thoughts, and by how many you can still control. Psychologists who've studied long-term solitary confinement describe its effects like a disease. Hallucinations, paranoia, rage. Inmates begin hearing whispers, footsteps that aren't there, or voices from the walls. A former guard once said, "It's the quiet that gets them. You can see it in their eyes, that blank stare. The sound of nothing starts to eat their soul." By evening, dinner arrives. It's the same as breakfast, repetitive, tasteless, routine. Then the lights dim slightly, but they never go out completely. The prison is designed that way, to eliminate shadows, to remove mystery, to control even darkness. At 10 p.m., the cell is still. The world outside is asleep, but inside ADX, no one truly rests. The air smells of dust and steel. The only movement is the flicker of fluorescent light against concrete. And so the day ends exactly as it began, in silence. But here, silence doesn't mean peace. It means control. It means power. And for some, it means the slow erosion of what makes them human. The men who cannot be broken. Inside ADX Florence, names become numbers. Notorious criminals. Domestic terrorists. International drug lords. All stripped of power, privacy, and identity. Each one confined to a 7 by 12-foot cell, all equally small, equally silent. But behind those concrete walls are some of the most infamous men in modern history. Men who once commanded armies, terrified nations, and defied entire governments. And yet, here, they are all just prisoners, tested by a system built to break the spirit. Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. He was the first to call ADX a clean version of hell. Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, waged a nationwide bombing campaign that lasted nearly 2 decades. When he was captured in 1996, the FBI called him one of the most brilliant and dangerous minds they had ever encountered. Inside ADX, his intelligence became both a weapon and a curse. He refused therapy, declined interviews, and spent years writing meticulous, handwritten pages stacked neatly in his cell. He communicated only through letters, answering fan mail and exchanging ideas with outsiders. Even within confinement, he maintained his routine, reading, writing, thinking. But over time, reports said he began to fade into silence, the same silence that swallowed thousands before him. In 2023, at age 81, Kaczynski took his own life in federal custody. To some, it was the final proof that even the most calculating mind can break when trapped too long inside its own echo. He survived bombs, manhunts, and years in hiding. But he couldn't survive the box. Ramzi Youssef, the first World Trade Center bomber. A few cells away sits Ramzi Youssef, the architect of the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. He's been in solitary confinement since his arrival. His only human contact, God's giving orders through a steel door. Court filings describe him as cold, defiant, unrepentant. During sentencing, he told the judge, "You keep talking about hatred. You keep talking about this and that. You talk about civilization. I don't care about it." Inside ADX, his words echo in the walls that don't answer back. He prays, reads the Quran, and stares at the sky through the slit window. Inmates say Youssef once covered his cell window with paper, claiming the light itself was an enemy. Here, even defiance becomes another form of despair. Richard Reed, the shoe bomber. Then there's Richard Reed, the British terrorist who tried to blow up a plane in 2001 using explosives hidden in his shoes. Reed spends his days in total silence, his only conversation, the daily orders shouted by guards. He was once described as combative, but after years at ADX, he speaks to no one. Prison psychologists call it learned compliance, the point where the human mind stops resisting because it sees no purpose in defiance. That's the power of isolation. It doesn't always break the body. It convinces the mind that there's nothing left worth breaking. El Chapo Guzman, the drug lord who thought he could escape anything. When Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, Mexico's most powerful drug lord, was sentenced to life in 2019, he thought he'd seen the worst. He had escaped from 2 Mexican prisons, once through a laundry cart, and once through a mile-long tunnel dug beneath his cell. But ADX Florence isn't Mexico. There are no tunnels, no gods to bribe, no phones, no contact. Here, every move El Chapo makes is watched. He eats alone, exercises alone, showers alone. Even his lawyers and family must speak through thick glass, monitored at all times. According to his attorney, Guzman once told the court, "Since my arrival here, I have suffered from headaches, memory loss, and depression. I am being tortured." He begged for sunlight, for human contact, for a voice. But at ADX, isolation isn't punishment, it's policy. The psychology of powerlessness. In a 2014 report, Amnesty International called ADX a violation of international human rights standards. Even some former wardens admitted the system can destroy men who might otherwise live quiet lives in less restrictive prisons. A former guard, speaking anonymously, said, "I've seen men come in proud and strong. But this place, it's different. It gets in their heads. You can see it in their walk, in their eyes. They stop looking up." For inmates like Kaczynski, Youssef, Reed, and Guzman, the prison is not just a building. It's a machine, a perfect, silent mechanism of control. The purpose of ADX isn't just to contain bodies. It's to contain minds. To take those who once terrified the world and make them disappear from it. Breaking point. When the mind turns against itself. Inside ADX Florence, time doesn't move, it accumulates. Days pile onto days, years onto years, until memories begin to blur and the line between punishment and psychological torture disappears completely. Here, the silence is louder than any scream. And for some, it becomes unbearable. When the mind starts to fracture. In 2012, the New York Times obtained confidential medical reports from inside ADX. The findings were chilling. Many prisoners were hearing voices, talking to themselves, and self-harming, yet remained locked in solitary cells instead of being transferred to mental health units. One inmate, Jack Powers, had been held in isolation for over a decade. He lost touch with reality, mutilated himself repeatedly, and begged for treatment. Instead, he was written up for destruction of government property, because the property was his own body. Another inmate, Michael Baycoat, spent years screaming through the vent for help, unseen and unheard. Psychiatrists who later reviewed his file said he had been psychotic for years before anyone noticed. In a place designed for control, even madness can be mistaken for misbehavior. The Cunningham lawsuit. America confronts the Supermax. In 2012, a class action lawsuit, Cunningham versus Federal Bureau of Prisons, changed everything. It alleged that the Bureau was knowingly keeping mentally ill inmates in conditions that worsened their illness. Prisoners reported smearing blood and feces on their walls, talking to imaginary voices, and begging guards to kill them. One plaintiff wrote in a smuggled letter, "The silence is a weapon. The walls talk back. I don't know if I'm alive or dreaming." 4 years, the Bureau denied the claims. But when photographs, medical records, and staff testimonies emerged, the truth could no longer be hidden. Under pressure, the government finally settled the case in 2015. As part of the agreement, the Bureau of Prisons created a mental health treatment unit at ADX, called the Secure Mental Health Step-Down Program. It was the first acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, even monsters need mercy. The gods who broke too. It wasn't just inmates who suffered. Former guards described emotional burnout, paranoia, and PTSD after years working in such silence. One correctional officer told a journalist in 2016, "You start to feel what they feel. The quiet gets inside you. When you go home, it's still there." Another confessed he would leave his television on all night, not for entertainment, but just to hear something. Isolation, it turns out, doesn't just break inmates. It seeps into everyone who enters those walls. A system without sunlight. ADX Florence was built to be invisible, a fortress in the desert where America hides its most dangerous men. But hiding comes at a cost. Even federal judges, after touring the facility, admitted that the level of deprivation shocks the conscience. Still, supporters argue it's necessary, a tool to contain those who would kill again if given the chance. To them, ADX is not cruelty, it's control. But psychologists, human rights advocates, and even some prison officials see it differently. They call it slow-motion psychological execution, a method of destroying the mind without spilling a drop of blood. One former inmate described it this way, "They don't bury you underground here. They bury you in your own head." Can the spirit be broken? For nearly 3 decades, ADX Florence has stood in the Colorado desert, silent, watchful, unyielding. Hundreds of men have entered its gates. Almost none have ever walked out free. It's been called the safest prison in the world, the most secure, the most controlled. But safety and humanity do not always share the same walls. Because when a man spends 23 hours a day alone, when his only conversation is the echo of his own thoughts, when light and silence become indistinguishable, something inside begins to fade, and sometimes that something never comes back. Maybe ADX Florence doesn't break the spirit. Maybe it just locks it away, where no one can ever hear it scream.